Welcome to my FPL Game Week 5 team selection with no Mo Salah and a potentially injured Alexander Isak. We have a lot of things that we need to do with this team and only one free transfer available. And we're going to deep dive into all of the hot topics going into this weekend. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you drop a like, aiming for 400. I know you legends could do that. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. And enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, a bit of a recap on how my team is looking going into Game Week 5 without any transfers made. And it's worth noting, I haven't actually made a transfer right now because the Friday press conferences are going to be so important, especially for my own particular team. As you can see on the bench right now, I have both Muniz and Alexander Isak, and these are going to be the two major problems in my team. Muniz, if you did not know, was a bench option in Game Week 4, only came on for the last 10-15 minutes for Raul Jimenez, who scored in that Game Week 4 fixture, so not ideal at all. And Muniz then started midweek against Preston in the EFL Cup, so it's basically a disaster regarding Muniz. He basically is a massive rotation risk now, and I would not be surprised if he is to be on the bench for the next few weeks. So he is now a redundant FPL option. And let's be real, he has been a terrible pick for my team. The other one, and the big one, is of course going to be Alexander Isak. Now, we know that he went off at halftime in Game Week 4. That was just pure pain, that was. But of course, we all thought it was just a minor injury, but it had to be dealt with during the game. Now, take a look at this, taken from Craig Hope, which is from the Newcastle Confidential, has stated that Isak has now suffered from a toe injury and is a doubt for Saturday's trip. So, whereas before I think we were all pretty confident Alexander Isak was going to be available for the weekend, with these new fresh rumours, it's starting to really cast doubt on whether Isak is going to be available for that away game against Fulham. And end of the day, with someone like Muniz, you can kind of accept the situation with him because he's a budget forward. But when you're spending 8 to 9 million on a forward, you can't really afford to have somebody like this as a major risk going into the weekend, especially when you take a look at the state of my team, where I'm starting people like Lewis Hall, who is a massive rotation risk in himself, and budget enablers like Rodgers and Smith Rowe. So of course, hopefully today, and let's be real, Eddie Howe's going to give us no information regarding Isak. We can get some clarification, but this is going to be the major issue for the team. What to do with Isak, and we're going to discuss that in today's video. Otherwise, the rest of the team looks okay. Henderson won't keep a clean sheet. I've accepted that now. The back four is what it is, in particular the three of Robertson, Robinson and Trent. More than happy with that one. And of course the midfield five, while it isn't ideal, of course I have no Mo Salah in my team, and going for a captaincy pick is going to be difficult. We will touch on that again in this video. But in terms of Mo Salah, of course, people are maybe screaming out for me to bring him in. I've decided to triple up on them last week, and I knew I was doing that. Don't panic. But Robertson, Trent and Jota is going to be my choice of poison going into Game Week 5. But the expectation was it would be the final week of this triple up, and then we would look to reassess in a Game Week 6 wildcard if it is necessary. So this is the team right now, 1 million in the bank and one free transfer. And as I stated, if I am going to make a move, it is going to be all about those forwards. So let's take a look at the sort of options that I'm looking to replace Isak or Muniz, depending on that news. So who are the best Alexander Isak replacements for our FPL teams? And as I mentioned, for me, if I get no pictures of Isak in training and we get very, very indifferent quotes from Eddie Howe, I think I will sell Alexander Isak because I just don't think my team is strong enough right now to justify rolling the transfer, even though I would love to. So hopefully we'll get some news. And of course, if Isak is available, then I most likely will roll the transfer because I can happily play him. But with the assumption that Isak is actually going to be a major doubt for the weekend, we need to take a look at the best options available. And the four that I currently have on radar are going to be Everton's Calvert-Lewin, very much the budget pick at 5.9 million. Dominic Solanke of Spurs at 7.5, Havertz at 8.1 million, and Watkins at 8.9 million himself. So before we touch on the underlying numbers and which one is actually best for our teams, I want to bring up the fixtures because, of course, this is going to depend on what kind of time frame you have for your wildcard. Now, of course, if you use your wildcard, then this is a completely moot point. But for me, obviously, having the wildcard still available, I need to assess when I want to use that, because if I'm bringing in a player and I'm actually looking to postpone my wildcard until later on in the season, I need to look at these fixtures more than just a game week 5, because as you can see for Kai Havertz, if I'm looking at a 1 game week punt, this guy just isn't even on the radar at all. But if I was looking maybe to go for a wildcard later down the line, Havertz actually then becomes a really viable option, because even though he isn't great for game week 5, it's an inevitable transfer that I probably want to make for my team in game week 6. So while it isn't great for game week 5, you almost bite the bullet knowing that the transfer longer term is going to pay its dividends. But if we're looking at a 1 game week punt in isolation, because end of the day, as of right now, I am planning on using my wildcard in game week 6. Then we're looking at the fixtures for this particular week, and that is going to include Leicester away for Calvert-Lewin, which I think is good. Obviously, we've got Solanke at home against Brentford, and then we have got Watkins at home against Wolves. Now, of the bunch, I do think Aston Villa's fixture at home against Wolves is the best one on paper. Villa, of course, played Tuesday night in the Champions League, which is probably the best case scenario. Obviously, we've seen the likes of Arsenal play on Thursday night and then are playing Man City on Sunday. So at least Aston Villa have had the maximum amount of rest that they can do playing on a European night. Now, of course, we've had slight worry about Watkins, and we do need to wait for the press conferences because he was pictured with ice on his ankle after the game. He came off around the 60th minute, but it sounds like it was just more precaution. But let's be real. If a player's putting ice on his ankle and we already know that he's struggling with a few knocks, that isn't an ideal situation, especially when someone like a John Duran, who is coming off the bench for 25-30 minutes, is delivering each and every week. I've spoken about this. Whereas last season, Watkins had to play 90 minutes because Emery had no other choice. He actually has a hungry, fit, exciting forward available to him that he needs to give minutes, because hence why he stayed at the club. And I do think early substitutions is going to be a theme, even when Ollie Watkins is fit and raring to go. And could I foresee John Duran just starting this game at home against Wolves? Absolutely. So while I do think Watkins is the best pick for game week 5 in isolation, I just need to see some clarification in this press conference to suggest that Watkins is fully fit and ready for selection. Because if Emery comes in and says, you know, he's a little bit of a doubt, we're going to wait and see in the morning of the game, I don't think I can go there, because even if he does start, we know for certain he comes off on the 60th minute. Now, when we take a look at the underlying numbers, because as I said, in terms of 1 week punt, Watkins is the man for me. But if he isn't available, we need to assess whether somebody else can come anywhere near Watkins's underlying numbers. Now, Watkins in a league of his own, 3.73 expected goals, joke numbers, but we need to take into account the minutes played for each player, because when we look at someone like a Dominic Solanke, when he has played for Spurs, which is going to be 2 games, he has played 90 minutes in both. So I don't see Solanke being rotated in game week 5. I think Ange has brought him in, one of his record transfers. He is a guy that he wants to get into the team as quick as possible and up to speed with this Spurs team. And at home against Brentford isn't an amazing fixture, let's be real. Spurs offensively are struggling at times, and Brentford showed that they can be resolute up against Man City. So I don't think Solanke is an obvious pick right now, because the fixture is a little bit more difficult than that of Calvert-Lewin's and Ollie Watkins. The exciting thing about Dominic Solanke is that it is one of those moves that you probably aren't necessarily going to want longer term, just because of the other forwards available in the game, like a Kai Havertz in game week 6. So it is a brilliant differential for 1 game week in isolation. And again, right now I am just looking at this one particular game week with a wildcard in game week 6. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of ignoring the underlying numbers for Dominic Solanke, because as I stated, one of the games is against Arsenal, the best defence in the league, and the other one is his first game in a Spurs shirt. So we just can't come to any conclusions based on this right now. So if you are going to go Dominic Solanke, it very much is going to be a gut feel punt, and that is it really. As we spoke about, I love Havertz, but I would only go there if I was looking to wildcard later down the line. So I am going to get rid of Havertz as a pick. The other one is going to be Calvert-Lewin, and this one is a really interesting pick, because even though Everton have been struggling themselves, Calvert-Lewin has actually been ticking over okay. And I know there are concerns about injury, but to be honest with you, I do think with Calvert-Lewin it's a situation where we kind of have to forget the injury record and just wait until he actually gets injured, because he could keep ticking over really nicely. But the thought of injury is actually putting you off, and I just don't think that's a good enough reason to ignore him. The underlying numbers are good. 1.32 expected goals in 4 games, shot volume 6 in an Everton team that probably is expected. So he's getting good chances for the minimal amount of opportunities that he is getting, probably what you expect in an Everton team. And the Leicester away game isn't bad at all. So for me, at the time of recording, it is Ollie Watkins that I want to bring into my team. I'm expecting him to be fit and available, and I'm also buying in with the expectation that he probably will play between 60 and 70 minutes. But also I'm bringing him in with the assumption that I could have a captaincy option available to me outside of Erling Haaland, because of course with no Mo Salah, don't really have amazing options available. So with that said, let's get into my team selection. So here is my Game Week 5 team selection, and kicking things off, of course, with the goalkeeper. And will we get a Crystal Palace clean sheet? No. I'm just going to put it out there. We will not get a Crystal Palace clean sheet with Henderson, but hopefully this will be the last week of him in my team before a wildcard in Game Week 6. Been a bit of a disaster, let's be real, for Crystal Palace defensively and offensively at times. So Henderson at home against Man United, I'm just hoping maybe we get that rare penalty save or at least accumulate some save points to cancel out the inevitable clean sheet wipeout. In terms of the defenders, as you can see, we're going for a back three of Robertson, Trent and Robinson. Now, of course, Robertson was basically rested in the Champions League, which I think is good going into this weekend. I would expect Robertson to play. Hasn't got any niggles. I just think it's a case of he's getting on a little bit and they need to actually keep him fresh for certain games. Robinson, absolutely fine, was a minute away from a clean sheet in Game Week 4. And of course, if there is no Alexander Isak for Newcastle, it's not a terrible fixture for Fulham in that game. And at least Robinson does offer some sort of attacking potential. And of course, Trent, finally, getting those early substitutions, which I don't like, of course, happen in the Champions League as well. But do I expect him to start in Game Week 5? Yes. And do I expect at any time for him to maybe deliver attacking returns? The answer is going to be yes. So goalkeeper and defence picks itself. In terms of the bench, we got Lewis Hall away against Fulham. And again, he did start in Game Week 4, so he easily could start against Fulham. But I don't have that confidence right now to trust him coming into a back four. So ideally, with this transfer, it means that I can bench Lewis Hall and not have that problem. Next up, my Game Week 5 midfielders. And as you can see, the plan right now is to play a midfield 5. Now, again, no Mo Salah going into Game Week 5. I need to survive one more game week without Mo Salah. Personally, I think this is going to really impact my overall rank. I'm going to be honest with you. I ended up going for the triple Liverpool in Game Week 4 with the double defence. I didn't really have an easy way to Mo Salah without taking a points hit for my team. And I just felt that I could roll with it for the next 2 game weeks. I've survived 1 week. I need to survive the next. Do I think it will happen? Most probably not. And the issue with this game week, of course, is captaincy. We'll come on to that in a minute. So in terms of my midfielders, Bukayo Saka away against Man City. Not ideal that Arsenal played on Thursday night. Saka played, I believe, 85 minutes. But let's be real, Saka plays every single minute for Arsenal in the Premier League. So he'll be featuring against Man City. And hopefully, with Man City's defensive record still being a little bit suspect, we could either get an assist or a goal from Saka, which would be the icing on the cake for those managers, especially that are selling him. Could be a nice differential for me. Jota at home against Bournemouth. Now, I see a lot of people panicking about Diogo Jota, but I still think the same thing applies. I think he is Arne Slot's number 1 pick in this number 9. I don't think there has been any suggestion that he does fancy Darwin Núñez. I think Darwin Núñez is going to be a minute's risk for Jota. I think the same thing will happen. 60 minutes for Jota, then he will come off for Darwin Núñez. And again, this isn't an ideal situation. We kind of knew this would happen. And again, with a wildcard 6 planned, he will not be in my team going forward because the minutes risk is just too big each and every week. But the numbers are still okay for Jota. He had a big chance in Game Week 4. And could he do damage in 60 minutes against a Bournemouth team who do concede goals? Yes, the answer is. So I do not mind Jota. I'm not as worried about him as other managers, maybe because I'm only looking at him for 1 more game week. The other 3 midfielders, slight problems. Rodgers at home against Wolves. We are praying for an Aston Villa return for Rodgers, but I just do not see it coming. He probably will end up being that player that the minute I sell him, he goes on a hot streak. But hopefully, he can reward the loyalty in Game Week 5. Eze at home against Man United. I see a few people panicking about this. I have no concerns whatsoever. Southampton, obviously, put up some good numbers in the opening 20 minutes. I think Crystal Palace, with their attacking out influence, could do some damage against Man United defenders. So I'm fine with Eze for this game week. I don't think that is a forced transfer out. And then we got Smith Rowe at home against Newcastle. Newcastle themselves struggling defensively. Smith Rowe ticking over nicely. It feels good to actually keep him this week and start him, knowing that I'm not going to have any bench points if they are inevitably going to happen. So midfield 5 picks itself, of course, is all about the forwards in this team. So finally, my game week 5 forwards, and as you can see at the time recording, the plan is to do Alexander Isak to Ollie Watkins. Now, a few things about this, as we've spoken about already on this video. First and foremost, it all comes down to Alexander Isak, because if Eddie Howe, and he won't by the way, comes out and states that he is fit and ready for selection, then I will keep Alexander Isak. And to be honest with you, I actually then would look to just roll the transfer. I would keep my team as it is. Watkins would be Isak, and I would roll the transfer going into game week 6 and allow myself just to either wildcard with transfers in the bank or postpone the wildcard and use my 2 free transfers. But regardless, right now, based on what we know, Isak has a toe injury, he's a risk for the weekend, and we think Ollie Watkins is going to be okay. If all those things come to fruition, then I do think I will end up doing the transfer of Alexander Isak to Ollie Watkins. I see a few people talk about should you sell Isak or Muniz. Again, it comes down to the news, but I think when you have a cash cow like Isak at 8.5 million, 8.4 million, you've got to sell that player, especially if you're not looking to hold him long term, and bring in the players that have that upside available. Yes, I could do Muniz to Calvert-Lewin and keep Isak in the team in the hope that he plays, but then I'm not getting the true players that I want in this team, whether it be Watkins or Dominic Solanke. Now, if Isak's ruled out, and there are some doubts about Ollie Watkins, and maybe Unai Emery says that John Duran deserves a start, then I think this player would be Dominic Solanke in my team, and I would just take the ultimate punt on him and bring him in for 1 game week and hope that that Spurs team finally clicks in the final third. But regardless, I think there is going to be a new forward next to Erling Haaland in game week 5, whether that be Watkins or Dominic Solanke. Now again, in terms of Haaland, of course he plays. The big question is, which player do I captain of this 11? So of course, for my team, captaincy is all going to depend on what transfer I do make. But as you can see on your screens right now, if I do make the Ollie Watkins transfer and I only make that move on the assumption that he plays 60 to 70 minutes, then I currently have him just above Erling Haaland, which does sound crazy, putting the captaincy on a minute's risk for somebody like Erling Haaland, who is just going to absolutely play 90 minutes. But when I do look at the fixture schedule for Man City, the only fixture that I think to myself, ooh, Haaland might actually struggle today is going to be the Arsenal game. We've seen it in previous games between Pep and Arteta. There is basically 1 goal between it. It's been a lot of 0-0s, 1-0s either team. And Haaland up against Saliba and Gabriel, they do just have the traits to nullify Erling Haaland. Now, that's easier said than done, especially going into this season, because Haaland just looks a different beast. But with the potential injury to Kevin De Bruyne, I think that is going to slightly impact Erling Haaland's influence in the game. So I do think right now, if I do make the Watkins move, captaincy would go on him. But end of the day, if I have to put the captaincy on Erling Haaland, it is what it is. He is still a great option for any player, any week. My issue, of course, is no exposure to Liverpool in the captaincy area. So I have to get, let's be real, very lucky in game week 5 if I do want to get a green arrow. If Mo Salah goes off, picks up a brace or a hat-trick, then I have to just accept what it is. And unfortunately, that could lead to another red arrow this game week. Let me know in the comments, who is your game week 5 captain? Yes guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 5 team selection video. As I mentioned, haven't made a transfer yet, but the plan is to do Isak to Watkins if all the things that we're thinking do happen in the press conference. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you do drop a like and of course smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. If you have any questions, please do put them in the comments section. I'll be sure to answer them between now and the Game Week 5 deadline. Have an amazing day, take care, and I will see you in tomorrow's live stream. Cheers.